Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, in today's video, we are going to be talking about functional living room layouts. You know it's a serious video when I got my glasses on. We are going to be talking about functional living rooms. Okay, so this is everybody's favorite topic, which is space planning. Said no one ever. Space planning is like everything. That and lighting. Well, a lot of the stuff matters, but let's talk about like function, because if your place doesn't have a good layout and doesn't have a good flow and it looks weird, it looks off, it's not gonna be beautiful even if you buy the most gorgeous things in the world, and it's not gonna be fun and interesting and great to like actually be in. So let's get back to basics and talk about different layout options. Everything in this video is gonna be in order as the houses get bigger. So the beginning of the video, it's gonna be smaller spaces, and we're gonna talk about some bigger ones as you add in more furniture pieces. So adjust depending on the size of your space. Also, everything is timestamped below because you're probably gonna wanna zip around this video and look back on it later. Let's get going. Okay, so throughout this video, I'm gonna be showing you guys different living room configurations with graphics that I have made in Milanote, which is the sponsor of today's video. I use Milanote every single day. That is not an exaggeration. It's how I keep my life organized, and it's also how I ideate, plan, and organize all of my videos and content for my YouTube channel, and honestly have been using Milanote every single day for at least 4 years. Think about it. I have every image that I've ever used in every video ever, dating back to early 2021. It's all stored in Milanote because I love it so much, and I think you guys should consider using it for all of your projects too. So this is also super helpful for you guys if you're doing home projects. And it's like being able to save things that you love, things that you're considering, into a board, categorizing everything so you can go back and save it forever and ever and ever. It truly is the best way to manage a project in a really visual way. Do you know what I mean? And if you're not sure about where to begin, Milanote offers more than 100 built-in templates for you to get started on a project. For every video, I create a new board, title it with the name of the video, and then I tend to create columns on different boards for all the different topics that I do. And then I use Milanote's Chrome extension, which allows me to save the different photos that I have around the internet from Instagram, Pinterest, Google, you name it. That's where I get all my images from. And then I can save it to all the different boards that I'm using to help for all of my different projects, which is so cool. I can also add in notes, to-do lists, and save links, which is great if I'm referencing on an article or using clips from other videos. Milanote is really a multimedia platform, which is essential to how I plan my YouTube videos. For this video, I just saved a few different transparent images of living room furniture pieces from Google and then created different configurations so you guys all have a visual for what I'm talking about. I also browsed the web for these images and added them into their respective columns, which makes it really easy for my editors, Alex and Susie, to know which photos to add. So sign up for free and start your next creative project with the link in the description. And now that you've gotten a sneak peek on how I plan this video, let's get to some of those living room configurations. Okay, first off my list is going to be just a sofa. Okay, we're gonna start with the basics. Either a 2-seater love seat or a 3-seater sofa. You're probably gonna wanna have a coffee table or an ottoman here. I'm gonna assume for the rest of the video, by the way, that there's going to be a coffee table or ottoman option, okay? Yes, you're probably gonna want a coffee table. You might want a side table. You might want little poofs in there. You might want side table, you know what I mean? Like you're gonna have this, we're mostly talking seating here, okay? There's gonna be other options. I just wanna say that right off the bat because, you know, if you're gonna choose an ottoman, for example, and it's gonna be, say, an upholstered ottoman, you're probably gonna want a flat surface to be able to use for drinks and food and things, and that's probably where a side table is going to come in handy. If you have a coffee table, you might not need a side table. So feel free to adjust other areas of your plan accordingly, but today we're mostly really gonna be focused in on seating because that's what you wanna start with, and then you wanna add in all your other functional pieces later. But the most basic one that makes sense for a smaller space is going to just be having a plain sofa. Probably gonna be opposite of a fireplace or opposite a television. That's gonna be the most likely scenario, but that's the basic first place that we need to start. Okay, next up is if you have a space, maybe that's a little bit bigger, or you're gonna want some additional seating beyond just having sort of the 2 or 3-seater sofa. The next configuration would be to add a side chair or an accent chair across facing the sofa. Now, this one, again, is gonna be a little bit space plan dependent, but the advantages of this one is it really creates kind of a very interactive space between the people on the sofa and the person in the accent chair. Maybe you got 6 people in there, I don't know, but feel free to get cozy. But like the accent chair over top of the sofa or across from the sofa is going to be really great for conversation. Sometimes for me, I find it a little bit too interviewy when it's at an angle like that because the angle is such that the person in the accent chair is facing off against the person in the sofa. But it is nice to have that extra piece to be able to actually converse across from each other, because sitting on the same sofa, unless you're watching TV together, doesn't always feel the most comfortable. So having a space where an opportunity for people to sit across from each other is really helpful for conversation. A major drawback on this one though is that depending on the angle is that this person could have their back to the TV or could have the back to the fireplace, which for me doesn't make as much sense. I just personally think that if you can structure your home so that everyone has the best seat in the house, I think that's usually the way to go, rather than people having to sort of rotate their chairs if they're gonna watch television, which isn't ideal. Okay, but the second one, which I personally prefer a little bit more, is to have the accent chair run completely perpendicular to the sofa across from it. So you relax sort of the ability for people to converse kind of across from each other over top of that coffee table, but I think what you gain in functionality of being able to see the television or fireplace, which is probably gonna be opposite the sofa, I think works really, really well. This is also a really fun way to get a little bit more creative because you've got an opportunity here to match style or color or shape or something with the sofa across and do something really cool with a funky accent chair. So I think aesthetically it looks really cool. A really good example of this is when we did Eden's home makeover. If you want to check out that video, you can check it out here. We did a whole before and after of Eden's home, which was really super cool. Eden works for me if you didn't know. And we did a whole thing on it. It was super cool. And for that one, because of the size and the shape of the space, she only had a sofa before. So she only had that first option, and we were able to add an accent chair for her. And it just gave her more functional seating to be able to use for people to converse. And it worked beautifully. I love the end result of Eden's home. She still loves it, by the way, and worked really, really well. So that's probably your third option. And I like it personally more than the one at an angle. Okay, next configuration option for you is an L-shaped sofa. Now, this is where you introduce now like a chaise, and you probably, depending on your space, because again, we're going smaller, we're assuming you don't have enough space for an accent chair additionally, but it is really cool to have an additional chaise option. It gives people different ways to converse. People can also lie down using the chaise, which is kind of nice when you're relaxing in the evening. And also the newer versions of these, whether they're from like Cozy, Crate and Barrel, Article, gosh, West, even IKEA, like a lot of these newer ones that are coming out are very modular. So you're actually able to scale up the size of this L-shaped sofa accordingly. So, you know, you might have an extra corner seat, an extra side seat. So instead of having like the sofa plus 3 sectional pieces, and then you can have another piece, a side piece, and then have a chaise. So you can make it even bigger if you want. So there's a lot of opportunity here to sort of play because a lot of these are super modular right now, which is really, really cool. So this one does not have an accent chair option. So sometimes it can feel a little bit samey because everything's obviously going to be in the same upholstery and everything's going to kind of look the same, but it is super functional because you've got that corner, and the majority of the people, 3 people, are most likely going to be able to sit across the television or the fireplace, but the other people there can still see the fireplace or still see the television, but they're also able to converse on an angle with the people sitting on the other end of the sofa. So this configuration also works really well. Okay, next option available to you. Now we're starting to get a little bit more into kind of I would say moving away from smaller spaces. We're starting to get a little bit bigger now. And that is where you'd have a sofa and it's going to be perpendicular to something like a television or a fireplace, but opposite them, parallel to the sofa, is going to be 2 seats or 2 accent chairs. This one is super, super cool. What I love about this one is that it's not symmetrical necessarily. So what I mean by that is if you take this image and you sort of put a line right down the center, you can see that they are not mirror images of each other, right? So you've got the 2 accent chairs on one side and then you got the sofa on the other. But what is cool here is that they're very balanced because the sofa is quite heavy. You got the same visual weight on one side, but then on the opposite side, you got 2 accent chairs or 2 side chairs sitting opposite it, right? So it still feels balanced, even though it's really interesting because you got asymmetry going on in the space. So if you're a lover of asymmetry, which is a little bit more modern, a little bit more eclectic, then you might really love that style as well. Also, I would recommend that if you do have 2 side chairs, there's an opportunity there for you to play with a little side table between them and they can sort of share a side table. That can also be really cute. So being able to have a really asymmetrical space, so it does feel a little bit different and interesting, but also well balanced, I think makes this style really popular. I'll also just add on, this one I would say out of all the ones we've seen, prioritizes conversation more than the television, right? So previous ones that we saw, the television is going to be sitting across from the main sofa. Here, everything is facing each other and the television falls a little bit more into the background as a little bit more because it's perpendicular. So if you are watching TV, you are going to have to look over. That might be awesome for some of you in say like a living room setting, but if it's your main family room or main TV watching room, that might not be as relaxing for you in the evening. Okay, next up is the same furniture, but just configured a little bit differently, and that is a sofa plus 2 armchairs, but this time, instead of sitting opposite the sofa, the 2 side chairs or accent chairs are gonna be perpendicular. So now we're going right back to what I mentioned earlier, where you've got the sofa and it sits across from the television, but, so you are prioritizing TV watching this way, right, which a lot of people love to do, let's be real, but you're still getting the benefits of having those accent chairs on the side. So those guys are gonna probably be used a little bit less frequently, and those ones are gonna be used for when when guests come over to be able to converse while with the people that are sitting on the sofa. I like this one. I think this works really well. This is very asymmetrical, right? So you really want to make sure that the room is balanced, but that, you know, usually comes from other furniture pieces that you have in the space. But overall, this one is really cool. You're getting probably space for 4 to 5 people plus, which is really, really cool. You're starting to get into kind of more of a mid-sized living room, I would consider this. Still lots of opportunity to play with the fireplace and the TV there, but still lots of opportunity to converse as well. Okay, next up is going to be a sofa plus 2 armchairs, but this time, instead of the 2 armchairs sitting together, they're gonna be opposite each other. This is actually what I have in my home. This is what I have in my home right now. You can see I got a chair back there, you can see the sofa, and believe it or not, I don't actually face a giant window away from my living room and my guests. I actually turn this chair around when I'm not filming for YouTube. This one is really cool. I also had this in my old apartment as well, if you saw my old house tour, which I'm also gonna link to here from my old place. And I like this one a lot. I think this one is cool because you're getting all the advantages like I mentioned. You're prioritizing TV watching, which is here, right? So you got that's where I sit when I watch TV, okay? That's where I am when I'm watching White Lotus, right? But then you also have an opportunity when people come over that you can like have people sitting in these chairs and you're able to use them for conversation. These chairs typically outside of YouTube don't actually really get used all that much, except for when guests come over, which is what they're there for, and that's perfect. I also like this one as opposed to the previous ones, which I also think are really cool. It's great if you like having 2 different side chairs. So if you're like me and you have a little bit of a side chair addiction and you love to have like lots of different options for side chairs, because there's so many side chairs I love, this is a great way to find the whole like sisters not twins thing, right? Where they like look like they belong together, they feel really cohesive, they're similar in style, maybe in color palette, whatever, texture, fab, whatever, but they're different, right? And it gives you an opportunity to sort of have different side chairs in the same space. I really love that. Sometimes if you want to, you can match the side chair to the sofa, one of them, and then maybe have another side chair that's a little bit different. But I just love being able to play with 2 different style side chairs. You can in the previous version as well, but typically it's much more common for those to be twins. And so you're kind of getting that repetition because they're sitting right next to each other to have 2 side chairs that are the exact same. That's the more common used one. I think when you've got them opposite, the side chairs, you're able to play around with different chairs a little bit easier that way. Okay, next up, this is a combination of what I just mentioned, a little bit of best of both worlds, but again, we're getting with a little bit of a bigger living room here, and that is gonna be a sofa plus 3 armchairs, 3 side chairs. And that is going to be where you have the sofa prioritized to watch the television across from, or you know, the fireplace, whatever your case may be, then having the 2 chairs like I mentioned before, but then adding in that extra 3rd chair. Typically what you see most common is that those 2 side chairs are gonna be twins, you're gonna get that repetition coming through, but then that extra accent chair is giving you something different. I do like this one. It's the best of both worlds. I do find sometimes, depending on the space, it can feel like there's just a lot of furniture pieces, because now you're starting to get into one giant sofa, 2 accent chairs that are twins, and another accent chair over here, plus a coffee table, plus side chairs, plus whatever. It can feel really busy and really heavy depending on the size, but if you have a large enough space, I think it can work really well. A lot of people will opt for, say, a sectional or something, which is what we'll get to further down the list here. But this is another great option for you if you really love accent chairs and you want the best of the 2 worlds that I mentioned before. Okay, next up, this is a super, super common one, you guys, and that is gonna be 2 sofas sitting parallel to each other. This one is symmetrical. So this is out of kind of everything that we've seen since really the beginning, but this is actually where we start to really introduce the power of symmetry, which is really gonna make things feel really formal. It's going to be really beautiful, and it's gonna give you that kind of wow factor, because symmetry really does that, right? Like asymmetry is really cool and funky, and like I love that too, but symmetry is really neat because you're able to get that sort of impact that you get. Like I always think of symmetry, I'm like, walk into a church, you know what I mean? Like if you walk into a church, you see the pews on both sides, you see the big altar at the front, like, it makes a statement, right? Big tall columns and things, like you go into those European cathedrals. I was in Notre Dame like a month ago, like you just really get the feel and the awe of having that like impact when you walk in. That's what symmetry does that to you. So when you're in a living room, if you've got those 2 sofas sort of flanking each other like that, I think it's really cool. It definitely makes great for great conversation. It's a little bit more formal than the 2 accent chair plus sofa combo I talked about earlier. A little bit more formal, as I said. You are offset from the television, so the television most likely is gonna go perpendicular to both of these sofas, but it's really great for creating that wow moment. The sofas usually, again, if you want to go for that symmetrical look, usually going to match each other. And this typically fits a much more traditional style as well. So a little bit less modern and funky and a little bit more kind of traditional and formal. Really beautiful look though. Okay, next up on my list is going to be an L-shaped sofa plus an accent chair. So this is again going back to what we mentioned a long time ago, which was introduce that L-shaped sofa, but now the space is starting to get a little bit bigger. And not only do we have the modularity, like I mentioned, about having the L-shaped sofa, so you can add different side pieces as much as you want. You can go whole full-on restoration hardware, because if you've been in that store recently, I mean, some of these L-shaped sofas are gigantic. And you're also including a cute little accent chair on the side there, right? So I think this is a really neat one. It feels a little bit less piecey, like I mentioned earlier, where you got 2 accent chairs plus another accent chair plus a sofa. And it starts to feel like, although for a much larger space, you're really cutting down to just kind of 2 pieces. So if you want something really like, it's sort of with cohesion really built in, and it sort of just, everything kind of feels like it's a little bit simpler, you want less furniture, this is a really great option for you, because you're sort of taking those 2 accent chairs that I mentioned in the previous example, plus the sofa, and you're just combining it into one big L-shaped with an additional accent chair on the side. So I think this works really, really well. Again, if you don't have that accent chair addiction and you just want really you just want to keep it simple with that full L shape, this is the way to go. Okay, next on my list is going to be 2 sofas plus an armchair. This one is super, super cute. This is where you are starting to add in some accent chairs or side chairs in addition to the kind of formality that you're getting before with the 2 sofas. So this is building on that with additional seating. This is really a great option if you love all the symmetry that we talked about a second ago with that example, but you want to introduce additional seating. Also, this is going to come down to room configuration for you. If you have a really wide room, but it's not particularly deep, then just having 2 sofas might make sense. But if you have enough room for it, then by all means, feel free to add another accent chair. You can have something, you know, even you could have 2 little seats next to the fireplace. That's also really beautiful, sort of formal look that you can introduce as well. But an armchair does provide a good example, and it does provide some additional like seating. It is sort of, can feel a little interviewy. I don't know, it reminds me of like those White House meetings where you got all like the dignitaries and stuff, and they're all in the room and they're all on those sofas and the president sits in the middle. Like, it feels a bit formal in that way for me, but feel free to make it your own. But again, it's a really formal option. It's built for conversation. This again is going to be much more fitting in a formal living room as opposed to a casual TV watching room. If you want to go for more of the casual TV watching room, something like an L-shaped sofa with a chaise or something, get in a modular style, is probably going to fit you better than this one. Okay, next on my list, speaking of sort of TV watching spaces as opposed to the more formal living room presidential style, is an L-shaped plus 2 accent chairs. So now this is mostly for those bigger spaces. Most likely here, we're kind of combining at different styles. You probably have seen there's only so many ways you can build a living room, but they sort of start to build off of each other and give you options and sort of scale as the room gets larger. This one here combines sort of the advantages we talked about with the L-shape plus 1 accent chair, and then adding a second one, which is going to give you additional seating, and most likely those are going to match each other. It's kind of like if the sofa plus 2 accent chairs and the L-shape plus accent chair had a baby. Basically, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, next up on my list is going to be 2 sofas plus 2 accent chairs, right? So this one is the presidential version, but I think this one feels more comfortable for me. I think it's because when you got 2 sofas, you got, like, think about it, you got 6 people sitting there, at least, probably on those sofas, maybe not at least. So you got like 6 people sitting on those 2 sofas, and then you got 1 person sitting on their own. It's just a little head of the table, you know what I mean? Well, this, by adding 2, I think it just, especially if you put them on a slight angle or something, I feel like those 2 feel a little bit friendlier and a little bit less like you're in the spotlight. Sometimes I think a lot of seating configurations, I never like a seating configuration to feel like one person is in the hot seat. I think it's just more comfortable when everybody sort of can sit together and it's comfortable and no one has the main seat. And I think when you add that additional chair, or even 2 chairs, one across from each other as opposed to just sitting next to each other, I do think that it breaks it up a little bit and puts less of the spotlight on one person. So I personally like this a lot more, but again, this makes sense for a formal living room, especially one a little bit wider, because this is going to take a lot more space, especially if you've got those 2 accent chairs sitting next to each other, because that means the 2 sofas are also further away from each other, which probably means your coffee table is bigger than it probably was before. So you can see how we're scaling the room up quite a bit here. Okay, next up on my list is going to be 2 sofas plus 2 side chairs, but wait, there's a twist. the two sofas are actually going to be perpendicular to each other. So advantages of this one is, first of all, I think that this is better for TV watching, most likely, than if you kind of have the two sofas that are sitting across from each other. And the reason for that is because one of the sofas is probably going to have the TV sitting across from it, right? So that makes it a little bit easier for someone to be able to view the television. The other advantage of this one is if you like two different sofas, remember how we said I have like an accent chair addiction? If you have a sofa addiction and you really want to have like maybe one plain sofa, like a little bit more simple, clean, basic sofa, and then you want like a day bed or something really funky for the second piece, and you want to go a little bit kookier with that one, if you really want that opportunity, then having two sofas here can be really, really fun. Also, you will then have the two accent chairs sitting across from it. There is a version of this which you don't have any accent chairs and you just have two sofas. I just think it kind of looks weird and unbalanced in my opinion, which is why I didn't really include it on this list. It just looks like everything is like tucked in one corner. And honestly, for most people, 99% of the time, they're gonna choose an L-shaped sectional. They're gonna choose a sectional here rather than going for two sofas. But if you're someone who loves to have a couple of different sofas and you wanna get crazy, Studio McGee is like really, I think she uses this look a lot in her spaces. Maybe not this exact configuration, but her spaces are oftentimes a little bit bigger, and you do see a couple of sofas at a time usually in her spaces, where she'll do one really sort of basic modern one, and then she'll do one that's a little bit funky. And you see that a lot in her designs. And so if you love that kind of look, you want to have two sofas, but you still want to be able to have all that additional seating, adding in the two accent chairs is fun. It feels very asymmetrical, but at the same time, everything sort of speaks together. But there's a lot of room to play around with different styles here. Okay, next up on my list is just going to be a U-shaped sofa. Now, I've put this category here, not just because the video is getting too long and I was getting tired of coming up with all the different combinations, because there's many, but it's because this is where the modularity really comes in. And honestly, like, the world is your oyster in terms of what you want to do here. If you have a giant living room, yes, you can make as big of a U-shaped sofa as you want to, right? Again, walk into Restoration Hardware. I don't know what castles they think that I'm furnishing, but I do not have space for the sectionals the size of Restoration Hardware builds. You can get gigantic ones, okay? You can get L-shaped ones, you can get giant U-shaped ones. So the U is where, of course, you know, you're going all the way around. And the advantage of this is that you've got one big piece, right? You can configure it any way you want. You can make it whatever size you want, because these are usually modular. Oftentimes someone's gonna be able to see the television because they're just so gigantic, and they can look really really beautiful and cohesive because you just got one big giant furniture piece. Disadvantages, it's crazy expensive. You're gonna be spending potentially tens of thousands of dollars on a sofa like this. Because it's gigantic, it does feel sort of really simple because you've only got the one piece, which a lot of people really love. They just want to go in, choose one piece, and be done. There is a disadvantage of this one though, is that it lacks a lot of like modularity in the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, I said I don't really love when accent chairs have to be shuffled around to make a space functional, but there is something to be said for just wanting to like rejig your chair. I mean, I turn this chair around every single time I film a YouTube video. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you're gonna want to move stuff around and shuffle, and people come in and you're gonna have some folding chairs or an office chair here and there because it's Thanksgiving and you just don't have enough seating for everybody. And this is really locked in because you just got this one piece, right? So that's a big disadvantage with this one, but it is very simple. It's really easy to do. And yes, of course, you can add accent chairs to this. I just find sometimes the accent chairs get lost in this giant U-shaped sectional. So that's just something to be careful of. Lots of options there in terms of what you want to do with accent chairs, but usually you just see one giant sectional in the middle of a very, very grand living room. Okay, so that's it for me today, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. That was all the different combinations. I mean, I'm sure there are others, let's be honest, but we tried to be exhaustive and do it all. So many different ways you configure your living room, depending on your size. The smaller rooms, you might want to go a little bit more in the sectional plus accent chair, or even the plain old little sofa, little love seat there. As you get bigger, you got a lot more options here, but ultimately it's the same in terms of how you want to configure it. So I hope that was helpful. Somewhere in there, I hope you found your living room, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.